joining us. Getting ready to do another episode of Patio Stories, my regular series here on Instagram Live where I tell stories from the road. Today we're going to go to Ethiopia and Sudan. Get into some serious good storytelling about my journey across the vast Nubian desert. This is the patio garden out here. The cat. Start the show. Part of the stories is we always open up a bottle of wine, something unique or good. Let's get a little comfortable here. Take these off. Maybe take the hat off. So part of what we do also is a little charcuterie. I just put together a little cheese plate here for the storytelling session for Friday evening. So anyway, here's the story. This is incredible. So a little background, okay? I had been traveling in Africa from Cape Town in South Africa up here to Ethiopia, having crossed from Kenya into Ethiopia probably 2 weeks before the start of this story. So I've been traveling around Ethiopia a couple weeks, but I've been overall riding my motorcycle alone through Africa at this point for probably about 6 months or so. So I was ready to head to my next, continent, or at least the next part of the world, which is the Middle East. And it kind of begins with Egypt. So in order to get to Egypt from Ethiopia, you've got to cross through Sudan, which is the largest country in terms of land mass in all of Africa. At the time, and still today, the United States didn't have diplomatic relations with Sudan. So I started back in Uganda trying to get a visa to go into Sudan. And the process of that is you have to show up at a consulate or an embassy with your passport. They want to hold on to your passport and process your application. Well, in Uganda and in Kenya, I was turned down for the visa to go into Sudan, but somehow something hit in Ethiopia where I would manage to convince them. It took about 3 days. They kept telling me to come back. This is the frustrating part, because if I'm, there's only one way out of Ethiopia if I can't get a visa into Sudan. That means I got to turn around and go back to Kenya. I could certainly arrange to have my bike shipped somewhere, but that's no fun. Anyway, after getting turned down 2 times at 2 different embassies, I managed in Ethiopia, after coming back 3 times to the embassy there, they finally issued me a visa. It was like about $80, I think I remember paying for it. But there was one catch. They had one catch. They said, yes, Alan, world rider, you can have a visa, but it's only going to be a transit visa. This is the only thing we can give you. And a transit visa means they give me 1 week. 1 week to travel the whole length of Sudan, which is the largest country, as I noted, landmass size in Africa. But anyway, with the visa in hand, I managed to continue traveling to Ethiopia and made it to what was once the capital of Ethiopia back in the 17th century, a place called Gondar. There's an amazing fortress city built by Fasil, the emperor back then. I think it was in the 1630 something or other. He built this massive complex, this fortress. It's really stunning. The whole place is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And here I am in Gondar, checking out the sites, learning as much about the culture and the people as possible. And I'm staying at this guest house that's kind of got a U-shaped building that surrounds this kind of courtyard. And all the travelers there at this time, we're all getting to know each other. There were 2 other people actually on a motorcycle from Great Britain, and they were on their way to Australia, a guy named Gareth. But anyway, this is all to say that as I was exploring Gondar, I woke up one morning with a fever, a very not a good thing when you're traveling in a foreign country, is to wake up with a fever, a pretty high fever, and I was getting these shakes, and this was just a few days before I was planning to go into Sudan. Now, always we open up a bottle of wine here on Patio Stories, so why would I do anything different? So I'm going to share with you. I wish you guys were here, just hanging out, having some wine. You didn't see this, Haas, but we've got a little bit of a cheese and charcuterie plate here. That's why the cat is very anxious to get things going. But, okay, so this is, by the way, if you can see this, this is a wine from Hungary, the country of Hungary, and it's called a Tokai Ferment. Ferment is the grape, Furmint. It's a 2016. It's a dry white wine, and let's see how we're doing here. God, I love these wines. When you get a really good one, they can be like white Burgundy, like Chardonnay, like a really elegant French Chardonnay. So here's the tough part of this: is I'm waking up, I feel like I've got a fever. I fear that I've got malaria, because I'd traveled through parts of Africa where there was, where there is a risk of catching malaria. The mosquitoes there have it, and although I'd been taking a prophylactic, this pill, they're not 100% effective. They're about 50 or 60% effective. Little manchego cheese. My problem with catching this little bit of malaria, that I think is malaria, is when they gave me that visa for only 7 days, there's another little hitch to that. So, for me to get to Egypt, the only way to get to Egypt from Sudan is over Lake Nasser, which is a big lake that straddles the Egypt and Sudanese border. And this was formed by flooding the Nubian desert at that point, by the building of the what they call the high dam there in Aswan. So at this far north point on the lake in Sudan is a place called Wadi Halfa. And there is a ferry boat that goes from Wadi Halfa to Aswan in Egypt, but it only goes once a week. So I've got to time myself perfectly to cross the border, and the ferry goes on a Wednesday, and to cross the border into Ethiopia on the previous Wednesday. So that would give me the full week, the full 7 days to travel into the largest country in Africa, and maybe give me some time to explore a little bit of its culture and people and even food. So imagine this now. I wake up and it's on a Monday, feeling like I've got the malaria. And I know I've got to leave Wednesday to cross the border into Sudan on that Wednesday. Now, it's about 200 kilometers from Gondar to Matema, which is the Ethiopian border town right on the border of Sudan. And it's a dirt gravel road that winds through some low mountains, but mostly it's just flat desert. So all the guests in my little guest house are saying, "Wait a week, Alan. You may get stuck out there. If this really is malaria, you need to be seeing a doctor and treated." And I'm like, it's already. I've been 6 months in Africa. This is tough. Hey, thanks for joining us. If you've just joined in, I'm Alan Carl, World Rider, and I'm sitting here out on my patio in San Diego. It's a lovely evening here on Friday, and I'm telling a story from my Patio Stories series here on Instagram Live. And this story is where I'm riding my motorcycle from, I'm in Africa. I'm going from Gondar city in Ethiopia on my way to Khartoum, the capital of Sudan. And I'm waking up and I feel, and I've got to get to there. I got to cross on Wednesday to give me the time to travel across the largest country in Africa, and I only have a 7-day visa. That's all they could give me, which I was lucky because I know many on all the internet, on all the travel forums and everything. People were dying to go to Sudan, Americans, but turned down. People trying to come in from Egypt, turned down. From Southern Europe, turned down. But me, armed with a 7-day visa, I got across the border on Wednesday. And here it is, Monday, and I'm thinking I've got malaria. So I stay in bed all Monday, and then the next day I do a little walk. I come see there's some really cool churches. The Ethiopians, they're Orthodox Christians. They're Muslims there too, but mostly Orthodox Christian, and they have so many saints. But their favorite saint is Saint George. And there's a church of St. George there in Gondar, and he is this saint on a white horse. It's the coolest thing. But anyway, the next morning I do that. I'm kind of thinking maybe the fever is still present, but I feel like it's going away. I'm cracking it. So maybe I don't have malaria. So everybody in the guest house is saying, Alan, don't do it. Don't travel. You're still not well. And they say, we can tell. We can look at you. Well, Wednesday morning comes and I pack up my motorcycle. I've got to go. I'm so worried about this whole Sudan thing, especially how hard it was for me and all the work I had to do to get that visa. I've got to do this. I can't lie sick here in this guest house. So I hop on the motorcycle and head out of town. Now, before I head out of town, I got to fill up on gas. Now, it's again, as I said, it's a 200-kilometer road, dirt road that goes across this desert. And I'm told there's no gas stations. So on top of that, I have these tank panniers that kind of go over my tank. And in each of those panniers, I carry about a 1.5-liter spare fuel bottle. It looks like one of those camping bottles. So I fill those up with gas as well. And then I head, and the other thing I stock up on are 2 bottles, like about 2 liters of maybe 1.5 liters, I guess, of water going across that desert. It's very hot. So I got everything packed up. I've got my fuel tanks full. I got my spare fuel bottles. I got my water bottles, and I'm not feeling great, but I figure I can make this trip. I can make this journey across this desert in this nasty dirt road. And as I'm winding out of the city, you kind of have to go down through a series of small mountains or hills, and the road twists and turns, and there are no guardrails, and the cliffs just drop 200, 300 feet down, and it's dirt, it's sandy, and you've got to be careful. You can't go fast, because if you lose traction, you slide out, the bike goes out under you, it could drag off the side of the cliff and crash and maybe bring me with it. So I'm very kind of tense and nervous, but I'm making my way. People that I do see, it's very, very sparsely populated, but when I do see people, they're very happy to see me, and they're waving. I go through, and I'm not seeing any cars, hardly any cars. So as a result, I try to be at in the middle of the road as possible, so that I'm not too close to that edge, because it's terrifying. I'm here. I'm telling some stories. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I got a mail delivery there. My landlord just dropped off. Here we are, San Diego, Friday night, telling Patio Stories. So anyway, I'm riding on the middle of the lane, but still being in case another car's coming. So what's happening is you're going into a lot of these decreasing radius turns and blind corners. And as I'm coming down this kind of steep stretch, the road kind of banks a little bit to the left. And it's a really kind of not quite a hairpin, but just a hair before a hairpin, if you can imagine that. So this turn, as I'm coming around, I'm making it and kind of going at a pretty slow pace because it's a tight turn. And just as I'm coming around the corner, a big bus coming in the opposite direction is in my lane. This massive bus is in my lane, and I've got only two things to do: either run off the side of the mountain to avoid this thing, or lay my bike down and hope that it doesn't run me over and hit me. And remember, I'm going on downhill. It's coming uphill. It needs the inertia to come up that hill. My heart is beating, and I lay the bike down. It slides a little bit, but fortunately doesn't go off the edge. And just as that moment, I'm down, but shook up, and the bus stops, and people pour out of the bus. The bus driver comes out, and two guys with him help me lift the bike up. I brush myself off from all the dusty crap on the road, and they're all checking me, looking at me, wondering if I'm all right. They can still tell that I'm kind of sick. They don't know that I've been, pushing myself, thinking I had malaria. And one guy looks at me and he says, "Are you sure, mister, you are okay? You don't look okay." And I thought, oh my God, is it that bad? Well, this is just the first incident of what turns out to be the longest day of my whole time in Africa. I brush everything off. I get back on the bike, check everything out. Everything is cool. And I continue on. Finally, we get out of the mountains, and I'm just in this desert, this valley that's just vast. It's nothing. There's not even a tree. It's just barren and arid and just, ghostly looking. But the heat is beating down on me. I'm parched. I need water. So I stop on the side of the road, get off my bike, regroup, and where I usually carry my water, where it was before this accident, is sitting in these two little holsters I have behind my duffel bags that are strapped to the top of my rear panniers. They're gone. Both bottles of water are gone. I am right now stricken all of a sudden, wondering what the hell happened. And then it occurs to me that probably they're not in very tight there in those holsters in the back of my bike, because I can just pick them up and put them in there like that. So I think when I crashed, those bottles flew off the bike, and I didn't even notice. So here I am now in the middle of a desert. I've got almost 200 kilometers, 120 miles. Probably now I'm about 100 miles still to go, and I've got no water. And there's no towns that I've been told about in between. There's certainly no gas. So as I get back on the bike, I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be a long day, Alan. And I keep cruising across this vast desert. The sun is beating down. It's hot. And at some point, I see like a mirage in the desert. It literally looks like I can see two figures kind of coming in and out of focus. They're kind of wavy. And as we're coming closer and closer to each other, I realize it's two guys on bicycles. When we finally do cross, we stop and share stories. The two guys are from Finland. One guy's name is Jukka. He speaks very good English. The other guy doesn't speak any English. As he's telling me the story, he says he's 2 years into Jukka is on a bicycle trip around the world. And that his father had just flown into Egypt, into Cairo, and decided to join him for 6 months on the road going from Cairo to Kenya, to Nairobi. And I'm looking at the guy and saying, God, he's your father. He looks pretty young and in very great shape. These guys were both, bicyclists, really almost athletes. So we exchange emails and promise to keep in touch, and then bid farewell, and I continue my journey. And it's funny because 2 years after that time where I saw him in Ethiopia, we had stayed in touch over newsletters and sharing photos. He eventually made it to the United States, and he rode his motorcycle from New York City all the way to California, and he stayed in my house here. And we had many meals out here on the patio for about a week and a half before he headed back to he headed south into Mexico on his way to South America, which would have been his last stop, final continent. So it's funny how you meet people and you think, yeah, I'll get in touch, and sure enough, he shows up here. That's the beauty of traveling and about making friends. I always say there's no strangers, only friends you haven't met. So that's Jukka. So I continue. By the way, forgot almost the important point. He had a little bit of water, not a lot. He's on a bicycle. He's not carrying a lot, but he let me take a nice pull, a big jug off of that water, and so I felt a little bit better. I continue riding for about another hour, and then I'm coming into what is a little bit of a settlement. It's just a few like adobe-colored buildings, and there appears to be a few huts on both sides of the road. So there's people that live there. And as I'm pulling into this town, I'm thinking maybe I'll be able to buy some water. And it's at that moment where I notice another motorcyclist is coming towards me. And as he gets closer and closer, we do like we did before with the bicyclists, we stop. His name is Stefan. He's from the Netherlands, and he has been traveling around Africa for the past few months. As we talk about our experiences, and I'm asking him about Sudan and wondering how's the road, he says the road is shit, but when you get to the border, shortly after that, it becomes paved and it's a lot easier. And then he tells me that he was put into a Sudanese jail. That's right. Stefan went to jail in Sudan for 3 days. Why? Well, because he didn't have the proper stamp in his passport. Well, he entered Sudan, not like me from Ethiopia. He actually entered it from southern Sudan or South Sudan, which in the middle, at this time, it was in the middle of a civil war. And the northern Sudanese didn't recognize South Sudan as a state. So his stamp in his passport was from South Sudan, and they said, this is no good. This is not a real, you've entered our country illegally. And as he's telling me this story, I'm thinking about me and my 7-day cruise, and I know if I end up staying one extra day, if I miss that ferry boat to Aswan in Wadi Halfa, I am screwed and I could get thrown into a Sudanese jail. So my anxiety is increasing on this thing, and I just don't, I'm hoping that there's no problems, and that's why I'm very anxious about the roads. How fast can we go? This road in Ethiopia is very tough, and I have to go very, very slow because it's just a shitty dirt road, and I don't want to crash being all alone out there. So after we talk for about 15 minutes, I tell him about my water incident. He rumbles through some of his good gear on his motorcycle, and he gives me a bottle of water that is about third full and says, here, you can take this. Bless Stefan in the Netherlands. Every time, wherever I travel, I always run into the Dutch. They are great, passionate travelers. For such a small country, I can't believe how many times, more than any other country, for sure. Anyway, just as we're about to bid farewell, I just say, let's get a photo. Let's get a photo here. Let's do a selfie. So at this time, I'm carrying a point and shoot, nice, good quality Canon high megapixel point and shoot, and I keep it on my the straps of my tank panniers that go across the top of my gas tank, or where the gas tank would be, because I'm on a BMW F650 GS Dakar, and the gas tank is actually not where that you normally see in a motorcycle the gas tank is. But for all practical purposes, my panniers go over that. So as I tell him this, we all of a sudden are surrounded by a group of about 20 or 30 young boys between 8 and 12 years old. School had just set out for recess. There was a school just down the berm of the highway here, if you can call it a highway, of the road, and all these boys were just watching us, fascinated, looking at these two motorcyclists, looking at these two gringos, and chatting on the side of the road. So anyway, I walked back over to my bike and reach for that little case that I keep my camera in, and I realize my camera is gone. It was there just moments ago. I know it when I stopped because I saw it and I thought about taking pictures, but the camera's gone. And then I look around at the faces, of all these Ethiopian boys, all of these faces looking at me, and I know most of them saw what happened. Somebody grabbed my camera. But the real question is, who? I'm a little, already I'm tense. I try to be calm, but they don't speak any English, and I'm like, where's my camera? And I'm pointing to the little thing. And then the school teacher, a woman, hears my, my kind of yelling, my insistence that somebody knows where my camera is. And she walks up and says, "What's wrong?" I says, "My camera was here a moment ago, and one of these boys decided they wanted it." Now, I can't blame them for wanting this electronic device because there's no electricity here in this town. There's probably no running water. It's really a settlement. But I just know that one of the kids saw the person, and if we can just get somebody to kind of come clean, I want my camera back. I'm still going to be traveling. I'm on the road for another year, and this is my point and shoot where I can do quick little shots. Anyway, the school teacher says you can walk right over there. She points about 100 meters up the road, and there's like a little tent. It's like a temporary tent. And he says, "That's a police checkpoint. So go to the police checkpoint." So I go to the police checkpoint, and a gentleman, big black guy with a military uniform, wearing a beret, and hanging over his shoulder an automatic weapon. And I explained to him what happened, and he walks back. He says, "We'll see what we can do." When we get back to the motorcycles, the officer is talking in Ethiopian. Amharic is the language. Starts talking in Amharic to each other. And I don't understand a word they're saying. And then they look at me and go like, gesture, wait. And they go for a walk. And about 15, 20 minutes later, it seemed like a lot longer, but it was 15 minutes. But I'm wondering all the time. And also, it's hot. We're on the side of the road. We're not in any shade. All I got is a third of a bottle of water. I am screwed, I think. So about 15, 20 minutes later, the guy shows up, the military guy and the school teacher, and they've got a firm grip on the wrist of this boy, who in his other hand has my camera. And he walks up to me and hands it back to me. And then the military guy is like dragging, almost pulling this poor kid's arm out of the socket. And he looks like about 8 years old. He's one of the younger ones, and he's just got this horrible look on his face. And I don't blame him for taking my camera. I mean, that's a temptation. But he is looking like he's going to be made a lesson, But before I leave, and Stefan heads towards Ethiopia, he's going that way, and the kids are all sitting around, and I say this thank you, I hold up the camera, I take a picture of them, and there's one kid I notice, he's wearing an Arsenal shirt, the football club from the UK, and I say, "Arsenal, good thing, good team." So anyway, I bid Stefan farewell, and I told him watch for a couple bicyclists up the road from Finland, say hello to them, and I continue going. Now, I'm still now at least 60 or 70 miles from the border, and it's a hot desert. Now I'm back in this desolate nothing. Oh, by the way, there was no water at this little stop where the military checkpoint was, because there was a little guy selling some snacks in plastic cellophane and Coca-Cola. No water, but warm Coca-Cola. That's not a good idea. So I turned down the Coca-Cola, and I got my third of my water, and I keep cruising. As I'm making my way across the desert to Matema, which is the border town at the border of Ethiopia and Sudan, it's getting hotter and hotter by the minute, and my feet, particularly my left foot, my boot, seems like it's like on fire. It's sitting right next. It's my clutch. It's my gear shifting boot, and it's sitting right next to the heat of the engine case, right? And it's just hot. So on top of the hot weather and the dry parch of the dehydration I'm going through, my foot feels like it's on fire. Well, when I finally make it to the border, Matema, sadly, the border closes 5 minutes before I'm there, so there's no way I can cross. And what that means, is I am screwed because I'm not going to be able to cross on the Wednesday. Now I'm crossing on the Thursday, and I've got now only 6 days to make my way across the largest country in Sudan and across a harsh another desert along following the Nile River. Now, it's horrible. So I'm in this dusty town, in border towns in general. Some of them can be okay. This was a nasty, smelly, dusty. The thought of me having to stay in this town. Like, where am I going to stay? First of all, I could pitch a tent right here, but it's very busy. It's a border town, and I would not get any sleep. I finally find a guest house, and it's a nasty guest house, but it's the only one that has a room and that has a place I can park my motorcycle inside their courtyard. It's a tiny room, about 70 square feet, no windows. Doesn't have a lock on the door. It's just like a hook. And I'm thinking, great, how safe is my stuff going to be? And there's no regular shower. It's more like an outhouse. Well, it's like a little cove that, and I'm hot, so I want to shower so bad. And but it's dirty, nasty, and all it really is a PVC tube up from off the roof, hanging off a little bit, drizzling a small drizzle of water. There's like 4 guys waiting to use this one shower for this whole guest house. And I wait there and finally get under that thing, and it's the water is like, it's like hot. And it's just drizzling so slow. I can't even get enough water to lather up with my soap. But it's what it is, right? Didn't we hear that? It's what it is. Yeah, that's what it was for me. I also, when I was getting ready for the shower, taking my boots off, I noticed on my left foot, where it'd been so burning for the whole trip across that desert, I noticed that it's starting to blister there. Somehow, that foot got so hot that it's giving me like a heat blister. And I gotta really be careful because it's kind of, I don't want to break it, but it's gooey and dewy. Oh, it's nasty. Well, I've managed to find a place to get some food that actually was decent, and the owner spoke English and had cold beer. Oh, that was just such a great, of anything I can remember of being in Matema that night was the jolly voice of this owner of this little, stand, this food stand, who had cold beer that had, like ice cold beer. Ice cold Ethiopian beer. What do you think of that? Anyway, just gonna take a moment here. I'm drinking, for those of you who joined us a little bit later. We're talking about my journey across Africa on my motorcycle. I'm in Ethiopia right now. Now I'm at the border of Sudan. I need to make it to Wadi Halfa, the northernmost town in northeasternmost town in Sudan that sits on Lake Nasser, so I can catch a ferry to go across to Aswan and do this before my visa runs out. I've only got 7 days visa. It's all they would give me. So that's what's happening here, as well as the Hungarian ferment wine. Mm. Lovely. Mm. It's got a little minerality to it, but also a bit of flavors of kiwi. But yeah, you guys don't care about the wine. You want to hear the story. So I barely get any sleep because not only is my leg throbbing, I'm worried about the stuff in my room and somebody could sneak in. And it's a border town after all. Anyway, I wake up the next morning having only had about 2 hours sleep, and I cross the border, which is another whole ordeal. Now, the Sudanese border and customs officials are super nice because before we get into anything, before they even ask for my passport, they offer me a cup of coffee or tea, or chai, as they say. So I oblige on the tea, and they're very curious, asking me lots of questions. And I finally give them my paperwork and my bike documents and my passport, and they tell me that it's probably going to be about an hour or two for them to process this. And I'm thinking, well, it never really takes that long anywhere, but if it is, it is. And then they bring out some dates, little dates, a snack, and serve that with me, always refilling my tea. Um, so I asked him, this is another dusty town, but I said, there's no gas station in town, but is there any way, do you think somebody could sell me a few liters of fuel? And the customs official guy, you got a customs guy, and you have two immigrations guys, and or two customs guys and one immigration. Anyway, the customs guy says, yes, maybe. And he's got a Chinese-built little scooter, or it's like a 125cc, very cheap motorcycle. And he says, hop on the back. And he rides me through these maze of these corrugated, galvanized buildings. And we make our way around and around, and finally we come to a residence. And there's a kid playing with some sort of toy sitting in front of it. He looks like he's about 10 or 12 years old. And the customs guy speaks to him in Ethiopian, in Amharic, and the next thing you know, he's waving me this way, come, come. So we walk around the back of his house, where we go into like a little shed, and in the shed there's two jugs. They're probably about 10 liters each, I guess. One is a yellow one, and one is a red one. And the kid looks at me, and he points to the yellow one, and he says, benzine? And then he points to the other one, the red one, and he says, gas. And he gestures like this, benzine? Gas. Now, I've traveled in places where gasoline is called benzine, and but there is no gas. So at this point, I'm a little bit confused, because I don't want to end up putting something into my fuel tank that's not the real, gasoline. So I say, I don't know. And then it occurs to me. I point to the Chinese-built little 125cc motorcycle that the customs officer's on, and I say, gas or benzine? And the boy smiles, and he says, benzine. So they sell me a few liters. He measures out a liter at a time into another container, and he takes it over to the Customs and Immigration office, and we fill up the motorcycle. And eventually I get all my paperwork stamped, and before we go, he's insisting I have more dates and some more tea. He says, in 3 days, no less, I need to check in with the police station. Now, he's an official, like a military government official, but I have to check in with the police. There's a point in my passport where they stamped the visa that they have to check, to prove that they just want to know where you are all the time. That's the bottom line. So, crazy. I motor on, and I'm very tired, and it's still another probably 250 kilometers from where I am at Matema to get to Khartoum, which is going to take several hours. I am tired, and I only got a few liters of gas. I know I'm going to need to buy some gas somewhere between here and Khartoum. So after a couple hours, maybe about an hour and a half, I see a gas station, although it looks pretty deserted. But there's this part on the side of it is like a truck graveyard. I mean, there's just these old trucks. There's like an old fire truck. There's an old weird-looking trucks. And there's one, like a van, and it actually has Texas license plates on it. I'm thinking, what happened to that guy in that van? That's a story I'd love to know. But anyway, there is a guy that's running the gas station there. He's the attendant. There's also like 3 kids in there, teens, just kind of hangers-outers, And I pull in, and the gas pumps, all the digital, the dials and everything are all broken. So he says the way they have to do it is the measure method. So that's how they're going to figure out how much to charge me. But I fill up the tank, and the tall Sudanese gas station attendant looks at me, and he says, "You look very tired." And I'm thinking, God, what is it? What's up with me today? And people thinking that I'm sick or now I'm tired. It's crazy. So I say, yeah, I am pretty tired. I told him about the terrible night in Matema. And he says, would you like to rest for a minute? And I says, actually, yes, I would. He has a cot that he folds out, like one of these, like, military. It sits about maybe 10 inches off the floor. And he opens it up and he says, you can lie down here. I will watch your motorcycle. It's going to be okay. Now, I think to myself, that looks pretty good. But I wonder, am I going to be able to actually get any sleep? But I do lie down there. And for about 10 or 15 minutes, I try to keep my eyes closed and just be mindful and meditate a little bit. And what the tall gas station attendant, he's so considerate and sensitive. They had a little radio with a very bad sounding, creaking, scratching speaker playing music in a language that I couldn't understand anything. He goes over and turns it off while I'm there. How nice is this guy? So I get a little bit of nap, and I pop up. I feel slightly refreshed. I chugged down a big water. They're selling water there. I even had a little orange drink, some Sudanese kind of sweet little thing. I needed a little bit of sugar. And I got on my bike and I make it into Khartoum. Several hours later, I find a guest house run by a Norwegian couple, if you believe this or not. It's called the Bougainvillea Guest House, and it turns out these two have lived in Sudan for about 12 years, and they used to be running a very large NGO, a humanitarian aid organization. But they had retired from that and decided to open up this guest house. They liked Sudan so much, and I'm wondering why you like Sudan so much. There's no alcohol. It's a Muslim country. There's only non-alcoholic beer. I mean, this is what's crazy about Sudan. So I really wouldn't find a Hungarian ferment in Sudan. But it turns out that the wife is a nurse. And I show her this nasty blister on my leg. And she says, that looks dangerous. So she sends one of her workers to go to a pharmacy with a list of things, and comes back with some cream, some gauze, and various first aid. And she goes about popping that blister, treating it, and showing me how to care for it for the next week or so. She says it's going to be very sensitive. And I'm like, against my boots in there, it's a little friction. And I can't imagine how rough it is. And the road from Khartoum to Wadi Halfa to get this ferry that I need to do to take across the Lake Nasser, it's going to be tough. Well, she treats it, and it's feeling a little bit better. Some of this antibiotic cream she puts on actually made it kind of feel a little bit cooler. So after my leg is wrapped and I'm there, and I'm unpacking my bike, and I'm trying to sort out my kit, make sure everything's in order. And that's when I open up my tank panniers to kind of check on what's inside. Now, if you just joined us, you don't know, but I have two 1.5 liter bottles of water. Of fuel. They're like big camp fuel stove bottles. They're okay for using for gasoline. And before I left Gondar in Ethiopia, I had filled each one of those up because I was coming across this really long desert where there were no people, no gas stations, no towns. And but I never needed to use the fuel. I managed. When I look inside my pannier, I pull out the spare fuel bottle on the left side, and at the bottom of it, where the seam for this fuel bottle, it had split, and it was totally empty. There was no fuel in it at all. All that gasoline had drained out of the fuel bottle, through my pannier, and then dripped right down onto my boot, into my boot, and caused my skin to get an irritation from that fuel that emptied into my boot. That's how hot the desert was out there. that it was so hot enough that it caused the fuel in my spare fuel bottle to boil and create so much pressure. And I've been using these fuel bottles for 2 years up at this point, and through some pretty hot places, but never this. So that's so crazy. This thing had to have gotten so hot, it boiled the fuel, created pressure, and so much pressure that that the metal split at the seam, causing the fuel to leak out onto my boot, into my boot, and burning in my left ankle. Crazy. So, as I said, this journey across Ethiopia and Sudan is the longest day of my life. Well, I eventually do make it to Wadi Halfa, the Wadi Halfa. There's my cat is looking at my food here. I have a little charcuterie plate for those of you who join. See, I'm having cheese with my wine, and this cat right here really wants some of it. But anyway, I do make it. It's a long day. I do get there by that Wednesday, so I don't violate the terms of my visa. I am able to get my motorcycle onto this ferry, and yeah, this is the slowest ferry in it's got to be the slowest ferry in the world. I don't know. It takes more than 24 hours to go from Wadi Halfa to this to Aswan here at the High Dam in Egypt. But I do finally make it. Don't violate the terms of my visa, and slowly my leg heals. So that's the story here. That's the story. This is Patio Stories, episode number 11, I believe. This is the 11th. So I don't know. I'm gonna put on my specs and see who's joined us. Oh, thanks everybody for tuning in. This is kind of a fun series I do spontaneously, and today I guess I should give everybody a bit of a vertigo update. I've been dealing with vertigo. If you've been seeing any of my Patio Stories before, any of my Journeys webcasts that I do on Mondays, I've been dealing since June with this crazy vertigo, which is not good for a motorcycle adventurer. Anyway, I'm in the middle of a physical therapy regime called vestibular therapy, where they do some moves on me to try to head moves. I need to get the head and eyes, and then there's some visual tracking exercises that I'm doing. So I'm crossing my fingers that this will help, and I'll be able to get back on that motorcycle again and bring some more great stories to you from new places. But meanwhile, definitely look out next time I go live on Instagram. That's why I go live on Instagram. It's for Patio Stories. So I'd love to have you back again and tune in. So that was it. Ethiopia to Sudan to Egypt. I hope you enjoyed the story. I'm Alan Carl, World Rider, and this has been episode 11, Patio Stories. Thanks for tuning in.